Around the time that I started having more and more success, I had a crazy burnout. I was having like suicidal thoughts, and I was also playing shows at the same time. I would like to just let people know that I have those flat moments because people come and see me at a show and they assume that's me, just like full of energy, smiling, laughing, playing songs. And I think
songwriter from the east coast of Australia, a surfer, and a man that never took no for an answer, taking on any challenge in pursuit of his dreams. Our guest today is Ziggy Alberts.
And it's such a cliche, but it's a cliche because it's true. But I just don't know what I would do without meditating, which for me is observation without judgment. If I don't train myself to do that, I also don't get to be on stage and have the level of joy.
Was there a moment where it all changed, or did it slowly progress? Or
I've tried everything. I still feel like crap. I'm gonna go sit on the beach until I figure something out. And I just sat there and closed my eyes and I was like, it's actually a part of me that got a real kick out of people being like, you can't do that. You know, it was like, you have to play this gig, you have to play the pubs and you have to play the cover shows. And so I think there was a small mischievous part of me that got a real kick out of going and doing exactly the way I wanted to do it.
do you think that people that are trying to do stuff that's kind of out of the ordinary naturally have a bit more of a self-reflective nature, or would you say that you're very self-reflective?
I would say
just before we jump right into this episode, I need to take a minute to thank our sponsor of the podcast, Whoop, which is this thing that is on my wrist, and it's also the ultimate health and fitness tracker. It doesn't leave my wrist. The only time I take it off is when I'm changing the color of the band. This thing is the best companion when it comes to achieving your health and fitness goals. There's a couple of things that I love about the Whoop. One of the things is the sleep coach, because Whoop tracks my sleep and it gives me a score based on how well I've performed. And it also gives me so many other metrics, such as how much deep and REM sleep I got, how many times I woke up throughout the night. And I use all of these metrics to help improve my recovery, improve my sleep, so I can wake up feeling fresh to attack the next day's activities. I love this thing. And if you guys want to try out Whoop, you can go to the link in the description or the show notes below, or go to join.whoop.com/Chris, and you will get 1 month completely free, and they'll send you a band completely free. Once again, go to join.whoop.com/Chris, or hit the link in the show notes or the description below, and take your health and fitness to the next level with your best companion, Whoop. Let's get right into this episode. You guys enjoy. Ziggy, welcome to the show.
thank you very much. Great to be here.
You mentioned before that you believe music provides a real opportunity to be yourself. What do you mean by that?
I think, particularly as a singer-songwriter, I guess your job is to be yourself in the music space, different to, let's say, if you're like a rock and roll or you're an AC/DC and you put on a mask. Or I think of Sleep Token, I don't listen to a lot of heavy music, but Sleep Token's my favorite, like heavy metal prog band, and they've got a whole six-eye mask with blood and hoods and cloaks, and like you become a character. But I think for me, it was like an opportunity to be in an intense setting. And when something's so intense, which we talked a little bit about before, but like busking, it's so raw. I think the only way to deal with that pressure is to like be yourself. Like when you're on a street and people don't have to stop, it's pretty like glaring. And so you've got nothing that you can really do, I think, other than like be yourself. There's an opportunity to just like, to not put on an act. That's how I feel in like all the intense situations I've had in music, is it's not been a call to play a character. It's been like, how can I strip this back and just get to me?
You would assume though, when you started out being much younger, you're still trying to figure out who you are, right, as well. And so you start making music, and it's an interesting thing when you say be yourself, because a lot of people don't even know what that is. But would you say that music helps you understand you better as well? It's kind of like a journal as well, in a sense, as singer-songwriter. You're writing about your life, and through that you might understand yourself a bit more.
Exactly what I say about songs. I've written a lot forever, and I think probably a key reason why it's possible is because it is a journal. It's like the best writing, the best songs, the writing that I enjoy the most and the songs I enjoy the most are almost like observations. They're akin to like meditation, or they're not even something that's very special. They're just something that's true, and you've seen it, and maybe you describe it in a way that other people would understand it. And it's funny you say about being 18 and discovering yourself. You definitely have growing that kind of who are you? But I guess at the time when I started, I mean, I was just the biggest cliche ever, but I was just living in my van and I surfed and played music as much as I could, and that was like just very much me. And so it was that I think I stumbled into that very fortunately. It wasn't, and I was homeschooled, which we can go into, but I was also homeschooled. So I guess my sense of identity, I probably had it earlier. I had all of my personal struggles as well, but I didn't see inside a classroom till I was 13. And so that meant that I got to kind of be my quirky person maybe earlier than some people have the opportunity.
Do you think that when you were back then living in your van and you were playing music all the time, do you know what music was doing for you back then? Like, what was the reason you were playing music? Was there an enjoyment? Was it an outlet? Or what was it for you back then?
So it was, first and foremost, I was very blue collar in the sense that I was 18 or 19 when I quit all my other jobs. And so my maths was really simple. I was like, well, if I do 2 or 3 more shows, or let's say if I do 3 or 4 shows a week, I'll be just as broke as I am working the cafe, but I'll have a lot more time to surf. So it was a big career decision, evidently. And so at first it was like very utility, and I loved doing it. I could do it for hours. And then I guess continued to it was, I don't know, it was a compass. It was like, where am I going to go play shows? And I was like, I'm going to go play shows in the mid-north coast because I haven't been there and I want to go surfing. And so it was like, I didn't actually play very many cities at first. I played more of the regional towns that were by the coast because it was like, I get to explore the country. So it was so utilitarian at first. It was definitely a way for me to express and understand my emotions, like just get it down. And then you learn that people also, I guess, in a busking space, like respond. If that's like your genuine thing, people are so stoked because they see themselves in you and you can see yourself in them. And it hasn't changed. Things have changed a lot in some ways, but I think at that time also, what are you to do with your day? If I was to, like, for example, not do, when you quit everything else, like it was just like, right, well, when I'm not surfing, I guess
And
I'll
you're in a
busk.
van.
And you're in a van, so
Yeah.
you're very like, there's no lounge room, it's very transient and actually can be really unsettling. And so I was just like, well, I'm going to play 5 to 9 times a week. I'll play like a morning show at one market and I'll play an afternoon busking gig. Or I remember one night in town doing like a fresh cafe, which doesn't exist anymore, but the fresh cafe, I did that one. And then I packed up my gear and did another cafe on the other side of town, and then I did an opening slot at the Northern across the road. So I was just hell for leather, honestly. Not chill, like surf, chill, play music. Like surf, ADHD, bust my ass, not chill muso.
So when you're saying shows, a lot of what you're referencing is busking as well. So you would be going around to this, because what was going on in my head when you're explaining the story is you're going and choosing all of the smaller towns so then you can explore those towns. And what was going on in my head was, how are you getting these gigs at all of these places? But they weren't gigs at all these small towns. You were busking for the most part, or were you getting shows and getting gigs at pubs and things like this? Or how did that all work?
That's a great point. So the busking part was largely for me was like Gold Coast and Northern Rivers, because that was where like all the opportunity was. This is like 2013, 14, 15. It was like the epicenter. Like Byron Bay was like nothing else. There was a couple of core crew doing it, and it's been really fun to meet and interact and go join all the guys and girls who are doing it now. But I guess that's where I busked, and that was the epicenter of things. And then I would put call outs because I did this house show run. with a good friend of mine, Nick Saxon, and he took me out, and it was the first time that I went south of Byron for shows, basically. And I was like, oh my gosh, we can do house shows where like you do a ticketed house gig and it pays you better than the pub gig, and the environment is so much more conducive to my like to what it is to be a singer-songwriter. Not because busking's particularly friendly, but I guess that it was just so obvious that it was a place for original music, because at that time it was still like you needed to play covers if you wanted to play the pub, and they would pay you, but they didn't even necessarily want to book you if you weren't doing covers. So early on, pushing into original music, super early in my career, I actually would just put out on social media. I was like, I want to play shows in these towns on these times, like Instagram and Facebook, and random people would be like, I'm going to host your show. And we would book shows through social media. And this would be like someone's dad in high-vis directing 80 cars onto his property outside of Melbourne to, you know, like people, like we did crazy things. And in hindsight, like, you know, no insurances, nothing, you know, just turning up to people's backyards, total strangers. But I did that in Australia and in Europe. Actually, the first Europe tour I did was on that same premise, was just like, would anyone have me on these dates? This is the countries I'm thinking of. And because of all the busking that happened in Byron, I had like already an early international following of people like, I bumped into this guy, I bought his CD. And so that's literally how my career got started, was asking people on social media if they'd host my show, and people get in touch and we'd organize the show. It's crazy.
It's crazy thinking about that. But when you go back to those moments and you're reflecting on those times, is there like this thing in your head, like thinking, how the fuck did it end up the way it is? Like, did you know it was going to be this thing, or like when you look back at that, like, are you amazed, or what's going on in your mind?
It's a really good question. It's such a ridiculous notion. Like at the time I was like, yeah, I'm going to do house shows. I'm going to ask strangers like on socials. Like I'm going to ask the world, would you host my show in these locations in this time? And it's such a fantastical notion. It really is. But I think people were so in on the fantasy of it. People were like so charmed by being a part of that, and were very, it was very, we did it. Like it was a very, we did it direct to people interface. And to think that it would be possible to go from house shows to eventually doing like Sydney Mire Music Bowl in Melbourne, which is 13,500 people, to even try and do the math on how that's possible. It's like, what are you talking about? Like what's the plan there? But yeah, I guess that's the magic of the story. And to answer, no, I had no plan, and life was so intense at that time, and I was so wrapped. That was my dream. I was living like I wasn't doing it because it was the only way. I was doing it because I thought that was actually the funnest, most adventurous way to do it. And so then just when you're living life like that, I think things just seem to conspire in your favor. There's real magic to it. And so, no, I couldn't have imagined it to be where it is now, or just for it to go from anything like that is just, yeah, it still trips me out because it was so intense. Like when you're in that moment, you're just so busy living it, and then you kind of look back and you go, I can't even, that youthful optimism and just daring, you know. I think I got a real kick. There's actually a part of me that got a real kick out of people being like, you can't do that. I was like, okay. You know, it was like, you have to play this gig, you have to play the pubs, and you have to play the cover shows. And I was like, okay. Or you have to do this. And I got told that a lot. You can't play on stage by yourself. And we already had examples like Ed Sheeran and Passenger and people who do it all the time, but it was still the notion in Australia. It was like, you can't do that. And so I think there was a small mischievous part of me that got a real kick out of going and doing exactly the way I wanted to do it.
There's a level of power in understanding that too, hey, because when you can look at that and go, this is the path, the traditional path, like play the cover shows, go in a band, join a band, or start going into the pubs and playing these gigs and learning all these other people's songs and putting your own twist on them, and then getting a crowd dancing at a pub is the way people see it going. But if you put yourself in that shoes, all of a sudden, by you doing that, you're basically saying, okay, I'm going to blend in with 1,000 other people in northern New South Wales that want to do the exact same thing as me. Whereas by you stepping away from that and going, no, I'm going to give it a crack and do my own thing and try and like pave a new way or do what someone else is doing.
Yeah.
There's not as much competition in this space. It's like it's you and someone else. But if you're killing it and you have the confidence in yourself in that moment that you're playing cool shit, people love it. It's like all of a sudden you've just stuck your head out of the crowd by just putting your focus to something else.
It's really ironic because it's a non-competitive thing as far as, and I don't have the skills that a lot of other musicians have. Like I play by ear, I play my songs. That's that. But I don't have a lot of the things that you need to be a great cover artist, for example, like the skills and the musical knowledge. And so if you're not necessarily like the most versed, which I definitely wasn't and still am not, then you just carve out your own lane. It's like just step left and go that path. And so, yeah, that's a really beautiful like way to put it, that it was unique and it was just ridiculous. It was like it's why I laugh now is because like it's a more common notion now. And that's why I tell the story of it almost being like a cliche, because how many people have adopted the idea of freedom through van life, whether they're musicians or not. Like it's become a whole thing on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook and Tumblr, and shout out to anyone who's still on Tumblr. And what else? Probably Pinterest, like it's become this thing. But at the time it was still kind of like, I was still embarrassed. Like it's still a bit like, but that was the beautiful thing about Byron, because you arrived here and people were like, oh, where do you live? And I was like, oh, I live in my van. And you feel this like, this slight like shame kind of thing. And people were like, wow, that's so awesome. And that was that feeling of enthusiasm that I think made the most eastern point of Australia very different to like where I was from. Like it was this place where people were like, oh, you're a professional hula hooper? Wonderful. Like there's a real, like, I really appreciate that you could go and try and you go and dare to be anything at that time. And I think people still find with the Northern Rivers, they still feel, although it's like changing, there's still that notion that people go there and they're like, I'm going to go to the beach and I'm going to do more yoga and and that's wonderful. That's epic.
Yeah, you can kind of get anything you want out of a place like Byron Bay. Like whatever you look for, you could probably find.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And I want to talk more about when everything changed. But just before we do, in those moments where you're kind of doing these tours, you're paving your own way, was there any unseen or was there any difficulties that you would never have expect to have faced that you faced in those moments? Because you just came into this thing, you're putting on your story on Instagram and all of a sudden you've got some place in the middle of nowhere that wants you to host a gig of you singing your own music that you've just been busking on the street. And then getting put in the limelight, was there any unseen challenges that you were facing or any hard times that you had to overcome?
Oh man, like 80% of it, like it was just hard, like or 80% is a bit rich, but it was like a lot of like hard. And it's funny because the nostalgia of that time, you don't remember like how grueling it was. You don't remember, like a street's a gnarly place at like, like after 9 p.m, like any town that's a busking town, like there's the energy just shifts and it's like can be quite a gnarly place, and you're trying to get your gear into a car and find a place that you're going to next park. And I was doing it at first, not for long but in those days I was doing it like literally pretty much by myself in the van with the help of the people who are hosting the show and friends and family who I cannot credit enough. But like fundamentally posting up the CDs at the time, setting up the events, set up the website, set up your own gear, do your own sound, check people off the door. Like it was like completely me. And so it's just like constant edge of, I think just burnout probably back then, as far as you're just making it through everything. But it's also, it was so thrilling. So you get addicted to that, like you're just like, I'm going to put on I'm going to leave Byron and play a show in Newcastle on the same day. Like that was like, we're like, that's a good idea. And it's like, is it? Are you sure? Like, do you really want to drive all the way there and set up and play? But in some ways it probably worked because you were just like, I was a whisper in the wind. I was just moving through every town so quickly at such a crazy pace that like enough people heard the songs and the story that it just kind of became a bit of a story that a lot of people, I guess, or a certain amount of people heard in Australia. Many joyous moments, but I'm trying to think about that time, you know, sitting on the highway, the van that you've just poured all the money that you have into is like the engine's blown up and you're just like, okay, where do I go from here? The aimlessness of it, it's like, what are you headed for? You know, and that's true of music and touring like all the time. It's very cyclical, you know, like people, the biggest artists in the world talk about it. It's like, okay, Ed Sheeran's done the most tickets in the world at some point. And it's like, okay, wakes up the next morning, like, where do you go? And yeah, those times were rough, man. Those times were super rough. I just toured between fun and injuries and surgery and just was on a total mission. And but it made for good stories and great memories as well.
Do you think the thrill of it is what kept you going, or what was the thing that kept you going even though it was hard and you kept just doing some ridiculous things like being in Byron and then wanting to go to Newey just to do a show in the same day? Like what was keeping you going?
I think I was really convinced that one, I for some reason knew it was like definitely the right thing to be doing. I knew it was like the right thing for me to do. It made life adventurous. It made like, again, the notion of just like playing in people's backyards around the world. It's like, it's such a ridiculous, you know, it's like, what? Like, you can't do that. And so doing that was, the people kept me going. Like you would have a hard day or you'd be just flogged, but you'd get there and the people are wrapped and they're maybe doing something they're never going to do again, put on a house show. It's like, they're not like, it's now there's people who do like house concerts or help kind of, they have like, they help organize like a house concert series and we have sofa sounds and stuff like that. But I must credit, I believe Matt Corby might have been one of the first artists to do something like that house show tour. I think he, in like I can't remember what EP it was, but we have to shout out Matt Corby for that because he actually did it, I think. I know he did it before I did it, but he'd be one of the first that I saw ever doing a house show tour. But the people keep you going, the stories and the connection and the friends you make and the friends I still have now, like, you know, family friends or my adopted parents in Adelaide and adopted parents on the South Coast. And you have these people and you grow this community, and I've formed some like lifelong friendships from those moments. So I was also convinced that you could make a difference, you know. I don't know if you have any reflection on this, but also like I was just so convinced at the time that like I was going to try and be a force for good and have music one-on-one with people. And it's a pretty punk idea, actually. I have a lot more in common with like heavy metal, straight edge dudes than I do with a lot of other musicians. I was like all ages, community vibes, direct to people, a bit like fuck the system. I'm staying away from the music industry. I don't want nothing to do with it. I'm just going to play my music to people. And I was just convinced that was a very pure idea, you know? And I think in some ways, in actuality, it was. And that's why that was sincere to me. I wasn't acting that out. Back to, I guess, the first part of the show. Like, I wasn't acting out that story. I wasn't doing this busker thing because it was a cool idea or that was going to work. It was just like, I want to play music to people. I don't want anything to do with the industry. See ya. I'm going to surf. I'm going to have my friends. I'm going to have my rap bag group of friends who are like all odd members of people who never really fit anywhere else. And we're just going to do our own thing and be peaceful and try and like live our lives, you know?
And when did it all change? Like that was obviously a past life. It didn't always stay at that level. Was there a moment where it all changed, or did it slowly progress, or what did that progression look like? I'm going to pause this show for just 1 minute to talk about anti-aging and longevity, more specifically some of the supplements that I've been taking every single day to stay on top of my health, to make me feel younger and more youthful for longer. And the two products I've been taking every single day by Melrose Future Labs is the NAD Plus Booster and the Muscle Protein Complex. This booster contains nicotinamide riboside, which is a precursor to NAD Plus, which is responsible for cellular renewal in the body, making sure that you can renew your cells better as time goes on, making you age less. And I take a capsule of that every single day. And then the other one is the Muscle Protein Complex by Melrose Future Labs. And there's an ingredient in this which blows my mind and makes it so much different than every other protein on the market. And it's got calcium HMB, which helps you maintain muscle mass even when your training load decreases, which is absolutely crazy. If you guys want to try out any of these products, you can go to the link in the description below. And if you use code Chris Griffin, you'll get a discount off your entire order alongside all of the other amazing anti-aging products. Once again, go to the link in the description below or go to melrosefuturelabs.com.au and you can use code Chris Griffin to get a discount off your order. Let's get right back to the show.
Yeah, it's really good to point out that it didn't stay that way. And I think the romance and why I can go, I busked about 4 times in the last 2 weeks in Byron with the crew who are coming up now as, street performers and stuff. It's good to say it's easy to romanticize about it because you grew out of it. So I really respect the people like, shout out, like we talked about earlier, Juzzy Smith, people who have been buskers and that's been their core thing and they've continued to do that and they're not looking to do something else. So I can romanticize a lot because it did grow from, I guess, busking, and then we started doing the house shows and the pub gigs, and then it was community halls, and then it got to small venues and then to medium venues. And I'd say the tipping point was probably 2000 and it's hard to kind of say. 2016, 17 felt like, I went and toured Europe for a second time because I toured Europe for the first time 10 years ago, which again makes no sense because I had no reason to be doing that. But I had people who'd been in Australia, in Byron, who bought my CDs, and therefore I could do these busking these house shows in Europe. But it was probably 2016, 17, I guess. I was probably playing to a couple of thousand people, and again, nobody knew what we were doing or who we were. It was just me, my sister, my dad at that time, as a team, and that was it. And the boys on the road, like, Matt, Lockie, Cohen, Sam, my videographer, who's been, taking videos of me from probably my first dozen shows ever in 2012, OG. That was a tipping point that time, I felt, but I guess I was playing to 2,000-3,000 people at that time, but probably where it all really kicked on was with an album called Laps Around the Sun. And in that year of that summer of 2018 into 2019, that year was just mental. First time I had major radio support, more or less, kind of. It was the first time I was on radio all the time. And by that point, we had a kind of pretty core crew around Australia who were listening. So as soon as I got onto radio, everyone was like, we did it kind of thing. And then started the label. Did I start the label around that time? Started the label just before that album was released. So the first single was on the label after turning down some offers and just deciding to stay independent. And so that happened. Did an Australian tour, went to America and Canada and maybe Europe as well. I came back and I played a set at the GW tent at Splendor, which was the tent I always wanted to play because, my buddy, Kim Churchill, I'd watch him in the crowd there play. Ben Howard, that GW tent was kind of like the place. And there was this aerial shot and come back from overseas, lots of radio play and this kind of, what's it called? When you have like, it was just enough momentum. And I played this set at the festival, and there was like twice as many people outside on the aerial shot than in the tent. And I think that was a bit of a moment I was like, uh-oh, or like, oh, we're doing it now. But every moment felt big because every moment was getting bigger. So I think every moment looked like success for me because I was playing to 50 people. And then I played to 100 people at a house show, and I thought, isn't that wonderful? And then I played to 200 people, and I thought, that's sick. I'm growing. 400 people, I was like, this is amazing. 800 people. So the fact is, I actually was really lucky because it always felt like this.
Mm.
It always felt like a growth pattern, as far as like I was writing more songs, getting better at playing, more people were turning up. But to me, it just seemed wonderful that, twice as many people turned up as last time. And that's like a beautiful reminder.
It's a great reminder for everything in life, because like big is only relative to what big you have experienced in the past. Pain is only relative to what pain you have experienced in the past, right? And so if you're going through 100 people shows, having 150 people at a show is 50% more people than last. That's insane.
Yeah, it is.
But then when you get to 1,000 and then you then do a 2,000 person show, you just doubled. It's quite big, right?
Yeah.
But it's not as big as if you had a 0 person show and went straight to a 2,000 person show. It's interesting. I forgot who I spoke with now. Someone was explaining to me, I think I interviewed him on the pod. I'm having a mind blank, but they blew up with, I was listening to Zach Bryan. And Zach Bryan was on Joe Rogan, and he was basically explaining how he was in the military and he blew up. And his first show was like 10,000 people sold out or something. Yeah, first show, because he blew up playing guitar on his at night.
I know the video.
Yeah. And his first show back was like this major show. And it was just a massive sold out thing, and it was his first ever show. For him, that moment would be like a, fuck, I've made it here. Like this is like a, wow, like this is legit. This is full on. But would you say your feeling might not have been as severe as that because it was a slow progression of one thing led to the next, one thing led to another? Or would you say it was like a big boom all at once when that Laps Around the Sun started blowing up?
No, it was like a slow burn, It was a slow burn, and you can't, like, how the human spirit like deals with that notion. Like, I don't know how Zach, like, it's so wonderful that he is having that success and that level of success in a short period of time. I'm like always immensely admirable of people because I've grown into my career. Like I look back though, I also look back, and some of those shows, like that Laps Around the Sun period time where it went from, it just went really insane. I might have been 24, 25. Yeah, 24, 25, 2019. So that was my math 6 years ago. Yeah, like I was 24. And it's just like, I look back and you didn't feel so young, but I'm like, man, I was just like a pup. And I look back and I think, wow, I wish I had more grace for the pressure to turn up, and particularly the self-imposed pressure of turning up on stage by yourself, which I wanted to do, and it drives me. And still today, it's like the thrilling thing to do is turn up and just hold your own by yourself. No one's making me do that. There's no one to blame. But I look back and go, whoa, even that was a lot of pressure at 24. Like, I understand the struggles more now looking back. I'm like, no wonder you felt a bit funny. Like, that's hectic. So shout out to all the musicians who have, and I mean, we're in that era, right, where someone probably, I think of like, is it someone Perez who did Sailor Song? And I don't know anything about her touring schedule or size of shows, but she has a song that did, 300 million streams overnight kind of thing. And it's like, where's the growing for that person? Or like, where's the opportunity? Because it takes every single show you've played to deal with the problems you have on stage. Like, I played a show at River Stage a year or two ago. It was my second headline show back there, and I forgot the words to a song that I wrote at 17 that I've sung 1,000 times, but people sung it so loud back at me, it just shocked the words out of me. And I was on stage and I was like, this has never happened. And it never happened to that extent in 10 years, let's say. And so you're always faced with a new challenge. And I feel like I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful because I feel like the opportunities that I have now, I'm best able to deal with them in like a sustainable way. Whereas again, what does one human do after like playing for their first show to 10,000 people? If that's the case with Zach, like how do you unpack that?
Yeah. And how do you, like, there's no course or anything you can do that will prepare you for that moment. Really, you've kind of got to throw yourself in the deep end. But just before you said, like the pressure is self-induced, like it's self-induced pressure. You put the pressure on yourself when you're in those times of the laps around the sun going crazy, and you're pushing the boundaries with the shows you're trying to do, and even keeping independent is onboarding more pressure onto yourself, because you can sign a big deal and have them manage a lot of your stuff, and you know, that can be a thing that relieves pressure, or you could add more pressure by them pressuring you to do things you don't want to do and all the rest of it. There's so many different avenues with that, right? But I mean, like the self-induced pressure, and you said there's one thing that stuck with me. You said, no wonder I was feeling funny. What do you mean by feeling funny?
Oh man, just feeling that you're a mental case as far as you're dealing with constant sleep deprivation. You're swapping time zones. You're playing shows. You're always on the move. It's just so crazy. And like us doing before the party, doing the Wim Hof, like there's now ways, and that's only something I've done for the last 3 years, but that's something I do before shows. And there's things that I've just learned. Oh, that's how I best make my life like sustainable. I was never a big party person at all, but I mean, it was just, I think that sometimes the anxiety and struggles you have, they're not always linear. Like sometimes the worst I feel is when I finally let my guard down and I'm sitting by the lake. I'm like, oh, it's such a, then it just hits me like a truck. It's when I finally like put down tools that you kind of let the emotion overcome you, because it's like, you could, of course, there's no excuse. You can always break down wherever you are, but it definitely doesn't feel good to break down on stage. And it doesn't feel good to break down on tour when people like are relying on you. There's a whole, and at that time, there's a whole team and a whole thing that's a very self-centered and absorbed world that's revolving around you, but there's also other people's careers in it, not just your own. And you just try and put those little monsters to the side. And I think it's when you stop that you deal with, at the very least, very physiological things like huge dopamine crashes. And what's the stress one? Cortisol. Is that right? Am I tripping?
I'm not sure. Yeah, I think so. Cortisol. Yeah.
We need to look this up after.
Yeah.
Might be cortisol. We'll find out.
Because you bottle it up. It's your, we find this all the time with, you know, I went away to Tasmania over New Year's for a week and switched off my phone and everything. And the first day I started feeling sick.
Yeah.
It's like your body bottles when you're living life on your red lining, you're like, just like it's full on. There's a lot happening and you don't stop. You can't really afford to open that can of worms, which is the things that you're not hitting face on, all of the challenges, all of the stresses that you're feeling that you just need to voice, but you can't voice because, well, you feel like you can't voice because you're in the limelight, you've got people watching you, there's people that depend on you. And then there's also just people that have all these expectations on you and you just feel a bit overwhelmed. So you go, I'm not going to dive into that right now and be a soppy mess. Let's keep steering the ship. Mm-hmm. So then when you stop, it's like, I can breathe, but it doesn't last for very long because your mind just gets flooded with all the things you've been putting off for the months prior. And it's just this feeling of, I think a lot of high achievers and a lot of people doing stuff that's out of the ordinary suffer with this a little bit. And I say suffer because it's not fun in those moments, but in the reality is those very moments are the ones that build your character the most, are the ones that strengthen you the most, are the ones where you actually grow because you're looking within and reflecting. And I think we've got to look at those times when you're sitting by the lake and it's all hitting you as like a cost of all of the other amazing times. It's kind of like that pendulum swing. Like when you have a high, you're going to have another low. But I think what happens is the low doesn't become as low because you strengthen a little bit, and then the pendulum will kind of keep swinging and you still experience these lows, but you just get better at dealing with the lows so you can hopefully go through them quicker. But the only way to deal with those lows more is by going through more of them. And it's a good friendly reminder when we're going through the hard times.
Yep, absolutely. No, it's a very it's also like a call to, and he briefly touched on, but it's also like how touring's also taking this beautiful route of late, not with everyone, but with lots of people I know who it's becoming like, my buddy jokes to me, like he comes on my tour sometimes, Kim Churchill, and he's like, it's like the wellness tour because all we're doing, anyone's welcome to join me, but like all I'm doing is like going to the coffee shop and journaling and, and going for my run, putting it on Strava, doing my yoga. And like, it's actually unbelievable. It was probably mid 2023, I finally figured out, like the head banging against the wall person I am, but after like the better part of 10 years, I finally learned enough to how to apply tour to be like something where I came back from tour almost like stronger than I'd left. And it's become like this wonderful thing where I'm not scared about tour anymore because it's actually become like an amazing working holiday. That's one akin to the team that I've got, but also I just have learned to get the amount of discipline to figure out what I just cannot compromise on in order to feel well. And it's just been like, it's such a breath of fresh air. Like it's so hopeful because there's also nothing worse than feeling like you have to muster up something. I think people come to shows, right or wrong, identifying, and they're like, I'm going to swim with turtles. I'm going to pet a dolphin. I'm going to go to the mountain. I'm going to talk about my feelings with my friends. People like associate with my music, or people in my genre associate this wellness thing. And it's so epic to be able to like actually do it. And not all the time, because I fail at times, regularly, but the last couple of years has never been like better on tour, never been more sustainable. It's just like, man, best feeling in the world to be able to go and do what you love, but also not be like low-key dying. Because touring is like, it can be crazy. Like touring can be for your own doing and choices that you like all making as a team. Like it can suck if you want, but it can also be meditation and Wim Hof and running and surfing river waves and hiking. It can be all those things. And that's like, that's just so true. Can't help but want to put on my Jordan Peterson voice at this moment. It's the choices you make, the sacrifices, and having the amount of discipline to like just know what works for me and to actually do it. Like that's the secret to life, surely, as far as like just being smart enough to know what you need to do and doing it, which as a professional procrastinator, I can tell you doesn't happen all the time, but I'm stoked to have unlocked it a bit on tour.
Yeah, that's cool. I interviewed Will Sparks the other week and spoke a lot about touring, and he was explaining he would have these massive highs on the weekend, and then he'd be in his hotel room during the week in a random city in Europe, and he's touring Europe for 12 weeks just with two other guys, and he's just sitting there alone. Like, what the fuck am I doing? Like thinking, have these extreme highs, and he's sober for most of the things too, but you just have these extreme highs, adrenaline rushing, you're on the stage, you're in your element, and then you go backstage alone and you're finished, and then you go to your room and then you do whatever, and then you go to the next one, and it's kind of this really transactional feeling that can be a bit challenging at times having tours. You mentioned on a podcast about 6 months ago, you would battle with two thoughts. You'd have two constant thoughts. One was you just want to like quit and chill out. But then the other one's like, I want to tour every city and I want to go all in and put my foot down on the pedal. And you're battling these two thoughts of like two completely different lives. And when I heard that in preparation for the show, I could not resonate more when you're doing something so good, but you kind of look at other people's lives at times, or not other people's lives necessarily, but you look at a more simple life and you kind of go, am I doing this wrong? Like, am I doing this thing wrong? Like, yes, I'm successful and people are looking at me in this massive high regard and everyone wants to be me, but like at times I want to be them. And I want my mind to be able to switch off at times and I want to be able to just relax. And you kind of have that phase. And then next minute you're like, well, no, I'm capable of everything. I just want to go take over the world. Is this a thought that you bounce in between? And is it something that you struggle with still to this day?
Absolutely, man. Yeah, 100%. That's so funny. Like just in rehearsals for this upcoming tour, after day one, I was like, can I still do this? Like, I was like, am I tripping? Like, should I be doing this? Like, is this what are we doing here? Like, is this a good idea? And then, I think it's probably your personality too. It depends how like manic or emotional you are as well. But, then day two, we resolved the challenge that we had and we realized we unpacked the box and we looked and we were like, oh, it's not. And we did it and we were like, oh, that's right. It's like really inspirational to do this. Like, it's really fun. And even just for what I'm enjoying a lot at the moment is like progressing the show to not just be guitar guy songs, like to actually have the show have poetry interludes and to really build the set to be something that's like as a complete roller coaster as possible for people over a night. And I was like, oh man, I'm so glad to have done these rehearsals because I realized like how passionate I am about that now. And I think I think what I want to quit when I look at it, that feeling of wanting to quit, you just want to quit the unnecessary pressure or the feeling, and I'm sure you get this as well, is that it's that uneasy feeling that something should be different to how it is now. And I feel as if that's a very human experience. And I think ultimately you want to quit that. You want to quit that push and pull. And that's where, I don't know if it's still trending, but it feels like it trended and stayed. But mindfulness and meditation is so unbelievable because at least in the little Buddhist book that I take everywhere with me, meditation is observation without judgment. It's not even something mystical. It's just like I'm going to sit down, observe what's going on with me and the world and not react. And that's the thing that I think continually I look forward to continuing to quit. I'll stay active on lots of other things, surfing as much as I can, playing lots of shows, being a little less frenetic. But I think you want to quit the noise. I'm sure everyone probably wants to quit that. That's when I really boiled it down to, I was like, what do I want to quit? And it's just like, you want to quit that kind of unease. But if I quit touring, for example, like I'm not going to be nearly as driven or having fun and being on the adventure. It forms a huge part of my like purpose in life. And so it would be a ridiculous thing to quit. You might want to change things up, or you might not do as many tours in a short period of time. But overarchingly, I think it's just, I feel for myself personally, you want to quit the head noise and you want to continue to make life like a wonderful grand adventure.
Yeah.
And to not fall for like the mundane, to not fall for like, oh, this is how it is, or this is how things are. You want to keep like, no, break the boundary, find a way to release music that is finding your own lane again. Just keep progressing and keep making a fantastical life for yourself and writing a fun story because you can. Yeah, and like you've gone and decided that like I'm going to talk to people. That's going to be my job. Is I'm going to like talk to people about their lives, and that's like wonderful. That's the one thing you've dared to do, and it's wonderful that it's like look at how popular it is. As we talked about before, it's like people always want to see an example of someone just doing it, daring to do it, and I think that's a great wonderful responsibility for yourself. Because imagine if the world was doing that. Like imagine if everybody was in their vocation. I don't just mean like, it doesn't have to be something creative. If everyone who absolutely loved accounting was in accounting, who just digs numbers and being really OCD, like if they're in accounting, the world is good. And if the people who have some creative edge are in the creative realms, life's good. And I just feel like so many times I catch myself settling for something. It's like, why? Like, why are we doing that?
Yeah.
It's like ridiculous. But it's a human experience. And I think the world could only be a better place. The world would only be a better place if everyone was in their life purpose. And that might not be, like I said, I really stress like to many people who are listening and living more conventional lives. It's not taking and having a go at that. It's just saying like, if that's the life you really want to live and you actually find that purpose and structure and that accounting job as like your thing, then like I'm like, yes, do it. Like, and thank goodness, because we need people in accounting at this juncture, you know? But there's lots of people who I'm thinking about, you know, there's lots of people, so many beautiful stories of people just saying, I'm going to really go and do the thing that lights me up. And I think that every time someone does that, it gives another person permission to do it. They don't need permission, but it gives them like, we can do it.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, we can.
Yeah. And I guess we will get back to the episode in just 1 minute, but first I need to tell you about Switch Nutrition, one of the main sponsors of the show. If you guys are a regular listener, you would know that I love Switch and all of their products, and they're a game changer for me to keep on top of my health and fitness, to make sure I'm recovered well, feeling the most energized, and everything in between. But this is their hydrate product. I have a scoop of this every single morning. This new flavor, the mango and passion fruit, is probably the best tasting hydrate product I've ever tried in the world, and I've tried a lot of them, if not every single one of them. And then the sleep product is their designated sleep formula, which I take every single night before bed in some water so I can sleep like a baby, making me feel awake and energized every single morning. If you guys want to try out any of Switch Nutrition's products, you can go to the link in the description or the show notes below, or go to switchnutrition.com.au. And if you use code Chris Griffin, you'll get 15% off your entire order. Once again, go to the link in the description or the show notes below, or go to switchnutrition.com.au and use the code Chris Griffin for 15% off at checkout. Let's get right back to the episode. What's just interesting is those two minds of wanting to stop, wanting to put your foot on the pedal. Another thing you said on the podcast was the way I'm feeling heavily comes down to how fatigued I am. And I was like, yes, because when I'm really fatigued and I'm overworked and my plate's overflowing, of course I want to quit.
Yeah.
Of course, that's a pretty natural feeling to feel when you're in that state, right? And when things are booming and you're getting progress and you're feeling good, of course you want to put your foot down and keep going. You want more of that feeling.
Yeah.
It's like we want more of the feel-good feelings and less of the feel-bad feelings. When we're overworked, overwhelmed, we are flooded with bad feelings, hence why we want to stop. When we're feeling really good by what we're doing and we're progressing and we have this energy about it, of course we want to do more. And it's like the level of fatigue is what makes us feel a certain way, which was just fascinating. But another thing you said just in your little time speaking there is cutting out the noise. That when you're saying quit, you're saying cut out the noise. It's not about cutting everything out. That would lead to a unfulfilling and boring life. It's more about cutting out all the noise. And that's when I strip it back and I just think, sometimes I feel like life is way more simple than we make it out. Like we overcomplicate things so much. It's just so much more simple than what we make out. And I think what can happen is especially with social media, we can compare someone's highlight reel to our reality. Our reality, we see the full part. We see the noise that's going on in our head, all of the mental frames that we have to deal with. But when we're looking at someone else's, we're only seeing what they are willing to share. And a lot of the time that is the tip of the iceberg. And we compare their tip of the iceberg with our full iceberg, which is an unfair comparison. But then what happens with that is we feel like shit because we're comparing things that shouldn't be compared. And it makes us feel worse about ourselves because we're comparing their highlight reel to our reality. And it's just a really good reminder that like life is a lot more simple than we make out. But if we can lead on coming into that thing around, if you love numbers and you be an accountant, great. If we can lead with the soul-led version of ourselves and let that steer the ship, there can be a lot more people that feel more valued, feel more worthy of their life and what they're doing. And that'll lead to more happy people is what I would say.
It would lead to a happy world. To your point, I think as well, other parts of like my job, let's say about tour, which would probably be interesting to people, but like let's say like there is flights, there is transit time, there is a relative amount of monotony. Monotony? Is it with an N or an M?
M.
I'm not sure. Spelling's not my strong point.
Neither.
Ask the girls at the office about my spelling. There is some real stuff that like ironically, so there's that time on stage, but there's also all this time in transit and sleeping in a moving bus and all this stuff that for me, I actually like overall. I don't feel compromised at that. And it's probably a good reminder to like share even more of that stuff because the show is an hour and a half of a 24-hour day. There's 23 and a half other hours of stuff that goes on. And I am actually content with that, but that's not everyone's cup of tea. Meditating next to the trailer in some random cracked out car park, you know, having a barbecue, or it's just like us and homeless people, you know what I mean? Like that's not everyone's idea of like a fun working holiday. But it's like part and parcel. And I'm like, I've got no bones with it kind of thing. There was to your point about the highlight reel thing. I don't know exactly how we continue to address it. Obviously, probably just by being even more transparent, but it feels like that theme, the highlight reel, comparing the highlight reel to someone's reality, comparing reels to reality that's a beautiful, like succinct way to put it. And I think, yeah, how do we solve that? And I think a part of the long form conversations help. I've had so many wonderful comments about sharing more of the hardship along all the awesomeness that I've dealt with because people, I didn't think it's so obvious to my reality, but I didn't assume that it wouldn't be to people who might listen to songs or to even like friends and colleagues. It wasn't so obvious. For some context, around the time that I started having more and more success, I was also had surgery on my stomach. I had both my eyes operated on. I had a crazy burnout. Like before I started the label, I had a horrible burnout. I was having like suicidal thoughts and I was also playing shows at the same time, which was like so harrowing to go on stage at the same time and try and be a shell of what people are there to see kind of thing. To do all those things, I thought it was I didn't think it was obvious, but it's like because you're having that experience, but no one else is in your head, no one else, and particularly people who are listening to your music or listening to your podcast don't know. And so perhaps some of the transparency around the hardest things that have happened during the biggest periods of success would perhaps, it makes me think about UFC fighters. I'm a massive UFC fan, and how many of them are carrying injuries through camp. So you see this guy, he's got an 8-pack, looking like a Greek god, and you're like, I want to be that guy. And like the pain he's dealing with in the fight, he's probably dealing with multiple injuries. Dude's been on dude or lady, shout out Valentina Shevchenko, who's my favorite girl UFC fighter. they're on like a actual eating deficit in order to make weight through a huge grueling training camp. Like we don't see that. We just see some guy raising his hand at the end covered in blood and we're like, I want to be that guy. You know, I want to be.
So that's fascinating. This is interesting. When we're in the limelight achieving a great level of success and people are very attracted to us is typically when we're dealing with the most amount of pressure, pain, or hard times because we're just embarked in a new life that we've not yet lived and we're trying to figure it out. But equally, in that exact time, we feel a level of pressure that we can't share the challenge we're going through because there's all these new eyes on us making a new perception on us that we feel like we need to maintain. So we go through the most amount of pain, but we share less. Of course we go through this tough time.
Yeah.
You're explaining this and I'm just going, it makes a lot of sense. Like even in my life, it's like there's no course to explain how to navigate that. You can't prepare for it, as we said at the start of the episode. You can't prepare for this, but it's this unknown pathway that so many people have experienced, but no one can teach because it's so unique in every way and you've got to learn it yourself. But I think it's just a weird one where we all want the thing, but we don't see what it takes to get there.
That's so important to say. Like I might say, like let's say, okay, we'll ask for success. Like so, we're going to say, okay, I'm going to play to thousands of people, and I'm going to have a hit song. I'm going to have a Stick Season by Noah Kahan. I'm going to have that album, and it's like, do you really know what you mean? Like, or you want to have the most successful podcast in the world? It's like we really got to drill down on the 23 and a other half hours of the day. As an analogy, like there is so much that comes with that. The biggest musicians in the world are dealing with massive safety issues. They've got people living outside the hotel they're staying in, somehow finding out the hotel they're in. Like it's like I say all the time, like I want to be so careful what I ask for that isn't what I already have, because when you ask to be the biggest singer-songwriter on the planet, like an Ed Sheeran or like Noah Kahan last year or Zach Bryan, can that guy go anywhere without security? Can he go for a surf in his van? Can he go camping in his van? Can he go do anything? Like, can you go do anything? Like that's, and maybe he can. I don't know if he can or not, but like my guess is that dude's rolling around largely in and out of places with security because he's, a mega star. And it's like, it's easy to think I want that. And it's like, do you want that, or do you just want the tip of the iceberg that you're seeing? Because there's a lot underneath there that you got to kind of, what we should really ask is like when you want to be, a successful musician or I don't know, successful at anything. It's like, do you want like everything else as well? Because that's coming with it. So are you sure?
Yeah.
And like the answer might be yes. The answer might be it's a great adventure. And I wholeheartedly say yes to all of it. And then it's like, good for you. Like that's unreal. But I think a lot of us say or I might catch myself saying, I would like to get an even bigger wave than I've already caught in my life. I want to paddle a wave that's bigger than the one I've gotten. And it's like, okay, but you got to be prepared to potentially drown, get really hurt, not be able to tour. And the answer might be that's absolutely worth it. But like we got to be aware. Mm-hmm. And I feel like we're in that era.
Understand the price tag that you're going to have to pay for the level of success that you want in whatever it is.
And what is it? Because success for me is like, I have my career that I have now. I have my freedom to like write and release as I want, to play the shows that I want to play. And I have, touch wood, I have like a life where I just roam around. Like I like go camping, and I don't like, yeah. I left the biggest show to ever played and no one even waited at the back fence. Like people were so chill with me. I have the best group of people ever who come to shows. Like undoubtedly the best crowd I've ever seen. It's not just because they're my crowd, but they're the best crowd. And there's largely such wonderful people, and so like I have every metric of like real success. I don't even know how I've actually got it, to be honest. Like to have the level of freedom that I have and to also go and play big shows, like it's insane. And I think about it a lot. I'm like, yeah, it'd be cool to do something bigger for the fun of it. It'd be great to do even bigger shows because it's thrilling, and it'd be great to play arenas. But like, how does that impact the rest of my life? And how does it impact your family? How does it impact your friends? How does it impact their safety? Because that's no joke. Once you're dealing with that stuff, which I know musicians who do deal with it, like it's sad, you know? Isn't it a bit sad?
Yeah.
I don't know.
And I think we need to be, everyone that achieves that level has to be extremely naive to what that level is to achieve it. Because if they had known, do you think they might have done it?
No.
And a lot of people that have achieved so many amazing things, specifically the ones in the limelight, or not even people that have run massive companies just from a little idea they had in their bedroom. Like, you have to be extremely naive on the challenges that you're going to face when you get to that level that you desire to even embark on the journey in the first place. Because if you knew everything that you were had to go through in this journey and you were told that before you started, would you do it? Probably not. But then I think the great thing about it is we can't look at that and go, shit, well then should we never do anything and embark on this journey? The answer to that is no. I think you still should embark on the journey, and the naivety is amazing because what you build on that journey is what actually matters. It's not about the goal. It's about the character that you build along the way. And I think we can set these big goals and have these big things. Yes, it's going to be challenging. Yes, if it's in the limelight, your life probably won't be the same. No, Zach Bryan can't drive on his own without worried about some cop accusing him or whatever it might be, you know? But like, the person he's built and his willingness to keep going and the character that he builds along the way is one that is unique and special. And you'd hope that when he gets to his deathbed, he looks back at his life, he can go, fuck, I gave it a red hot crack. I tried everything I wanted to do and I'm proud of what I've done. And I think if you don't embark on anything because of you're too scared of what it's going to become, you're going to get to that deathbed and go, shit, I wish I tried. I wish I gave something a go because now I've got to this level and I've never tried anything I wanted to do and I've lived a life for someone else. And for that, I say, fucking give things a go. Like, try.
Absolutely. That's a really good point. I really love what you just said about being naive enough to not really know what the challenges might be. But I do think that like that just going for it mentality, and there's also a chance that you might get to those places. And I think Noah Kahan's done this pretty well. I don't know him personally, but I think he's done it pretty well. Like, you also have a chance to potentially, if you achieve that success, to also shift the way that works. And what I mean is you also can set a new status quo about how someone at that level operates or how they interact with the life and the public. And I think that's like a worthy challenge. Yeah, you would suffer if you didn't give it a try. If you didn't give it a try, you suffer. And like I said, I'm not saying that also might be very exciting. You know, I remember a gig where there was a massive fire that broke out next door to the venue. I play my last song. My tour manager is like, we gotta get it. Fire alarm goes off. We run through the backstage, go out to the car parked in the front of the street where everyone who's just been at the show. We like try and get through the crowd, get into the car. It's like a full scene. It's like the only car scene with people like all around the car ever. And because no one got hurt, like it was exciting. It was fun. It was dramatic. We all like a bit of drama, you know? It was fun and dramatic and no one got hurt, you know, which is the important part. No one got hurt. So there's a great line in the book called Illusions by Richard Bach, who's like a 70s author, who's one of my favorite authors. And, you know, there's a bit of chum in all of us, and that's why we do it. That's you got to be up for a bit of drama if you're going to do any of it. And man, circling back to something about headspace and the quitting feeling, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. I actually think that the thing we're most heavily addicted to is neurotic thoughts. I think that's the biggest. I feel it may be the underlying addiction under all of it, because we might choose that to be drugs and alcohol. We might choose that to be socials. We might choose that to be a toxic relationship. But I feel like ultimately the thing we're most addicted to, or we're at most contention with, I actually think is an addiction to thinking, to neurotic constant thinking.
What's neurotic thoughts
mean? Like nonsensical and constant, just like jibber jabber. Like I feel like, or the notion, I need to go to the pokies. And it's like, no, you don't. You don't need to go to the pokies. Shout out everyone not going to the pokies. And if you go to the pokies, gamble responsibly. Like that notion that I need to have a third cup of coffee is like, I want it. I don't need it. But that layer of that initial thing, I wonder if I don't know if you've thought about this. I don't know if you have considered this before, but I thought a lot about addiction, and I haven't read a lot about addiction. So I don't know the psychological or physiological stuff, but I wonder if underlying it, we're just addicted to being very moved by our thoughts and constantly reacting to them.
Well, we're reacting based on, and our environment and the life we have is based on the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves. And so the prime example, right, is a smoker decides he wants to stop smoking. And what he does is he goes, I'm going to stop smoking. So he changes the behavior, the smoking of it. But then when someone asks him, hey mate, are you a smoker? He'll be like, yeah, I am, but I'm trying to get off the smokes. I'm actually 27 days free from smoking. And he gives himself a pat on the back. The problem there is the story about his life is he's still a smoker, but he's trying to get off. Whereas if you were to ask a non-smoker if he smokes, he goes, no, I don't smoke, right? That's the story a non-smoker tells himself. I do not smoke. So the subconscious doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's fake. If you identify as a non-smoker, you will more likely not feel called to have a smoke. But if you're trying to stop smoking, but your subconscious is still, I'm a smoker, but I'm on a diet, basically, I'm getting off them, you're probably going to go around in circles. And I think in life, what happens is we are influenced and we grow up from a kid, and we start getting influenced by all these different people, and we onboard all these new beliefs about life and about ourselves. And those beliefs make up our identity. And then through that, we reinforce our identity with these stories that we make up in our head. And so this whole thing there is like, I need caffeine, I need this. That's a story you're telling about yourself. Whereas someone that doesn't drink caffeine doesn't feel that way.
Exactly.
And so I think it comes down to these stories that we tell ourselves. But when you're talking about these thoughts that make up our life, it's so true. I think if you assess your life and you look around your life and everything that's happening, it's a combination of a bunch of stories that you believe about yourself. So reprogramming your inside, your stories, will then reprogram your outside, your life, your environment. And I think honestly, there's a lot of power in transforming your life from the inside out, rather than just trying to change the behavior and the stories and the things that are on the surface level that everyone sees. I think it's much more deeper than that. But I also think in regards to thoughts is the more of a high achiever you are, I'd love to get your thoughts on this. The more of a high achiever you are, naturally, the more you are very self-reflective, and the more your mind is a bit more of a storm. You think about so much. You're just reflecting nonstop. Like I look at the guys that have a 9-to-5 job and they live a pretty chill life. They can get to the end of the day and switch off and put on a movie and just relax. And I go like, I envy that. I wish I could do that. My mind doesn't really stop. And that's why when you stop, you cry because you're overwhelmed, right? Yeah. Do you think that people that are trying to do stuff that's kind of out of the ordinary naturally have a bit more of a self-reflective nature, or would you say that you're very self-reflective?
I would say I'm particularly self-absorbed.
What does that mean?
I think that I'm definitely, probably like all of us, really absorbed in my own story. A part of my, made a career. Talk about this for a bizarre notion. I've made my job telling stories and singing with a guitar. Like that's like a ridiculous, it's like, that's my job. That's my career. Like what the heck? That's funny.
You do a good job doing it too.
Thank you. I'm working at it. And I think, I think there's people who tick in different ways. And I was always, at best, self-reflective, and at other times just a very heady. That's been me since I was 6. I mean, probably earlier, since mum and dad told me a story about sitting over the edge of those like little moving car things in the shopping center, and looking over and the wheels weren't moving, and I started screaming. Like I don't know how old, like a couple of years old, and so it's like that I should have that on my LinkedIn. Like, hey, this is who I was before I started realizing I was a person and stuff when I got shocked. And if you're a heady person, that's why, like, I don't know what I would do without, and it's such a cliche, but it's a cliche because it's true, but I just don't know what I would do without meditating, which for me is observation without judgment. If I don't train myself to do that, I also don't get to be on stage and have the level of joy, because if you're on stage, you can be on stage and be freaked out. I mean, you have to be actually really observant on stage to see, is anyone in danger? These people having a good time? How am I doing? But you have to be really like multifaceted aware, which is good because that's like I'm good at doing that. And you just have to balance it out with being like in the body, or changing that frequency to just chill out a little bit. And there's potentially people who could be, I think this is probably quite obvious to say, but there's people who I don't understand because I'm a very different person, but people who would need to be more in their head, more reflective, or a little more like considered, like there's I guess there's so many different ways to go about it, but I think that at the minute, I don't know, I think it's, for me, my like big life lesson has been like, use all of that as a force for good, but also learn to balance out that yin yang. And that's, for me, like, that's where like meditation and Wim Hof and those practices are immensely joyful. And it's mainly because I want to feel peaceful and I want to enjoy the wonderful ride. Like when you're there and you're on stage and you're actually there, like I kind of like come up from meditation, just walk on a stage like this. Like it's one of the best feelings in the world because you're really there and you're just sharing your spontaneous joy of the moment of just being there, playing songs, see somebody, they smile at you, you smile at them. It's like, that's what I value so much, is I get to like remember those things and feel those experiences, and it'd be the opposite. It's a real shame that we numb ourselves to stuff. And I know there's a lot of musicians who do. And I think it's only a shame really for them, because there's people there who like, they see, that's the most wonderful experience about stage. I don't know if this is a tangent. It's definitely a tangent. But the most wonderful experience about stage is that like they see you and you see them, and it's like, I feel seen. But the funny thing is that people, at least at the gigs I play, they feel seen in some way in the stories of the songs, or they identify with a sense of freedom that's there. And also I'm there in the crowd being that weirdo looking at them, like, and people are always so shocked if I get to meet them after a show and they're like, you saw me? And I'm like, yeah, I can see it. Like, well, when there's lights and the lights aren't too blinding, that experience of seeing people, it's just crazy. I think we forget that you and me, and hopefully a lot of people listening, have like reasonable lives with friends and people or loved ones around them that do appreciate and see them. But someone sometimes just like comes to a show and that's the only place they feel a sense of community. Or someone might listen to this and it might be the only time they've heard, it might be the first time they've ever heard someone talk about their feelings in any way. And that's such a, wow, like what a wonderful thing that could be possible.
I think that's truly what we all want, as you said before, just a feeling of peace, and also the feeling of being present and to be able to enjoy the moments. Like being peaceful and being present seems like a dream, really. Like deep down, I feel like everyone wants that.
I reckon, for
right?
sure.
Just before we wrap up, I want to go back to the real low times and the real challenges that you've had throughout your journey. We've spoken about the touring and everything, but for me, I'm interested in the songwriting and whether you're writing it for you or for other people or in other people's lens. In those real low times and the challenges, have you made some of your best music? Have you made songs to help get you through those times, or go back to those times and how you kind of coped with the challenge?
Yeah, it's a short answer. Yes. And that's a terrifying notion as well, I think. That's a terrifying notion that you can do. And I think that's the artistic challenge, is you can do some of your best stuff at your lowest. And it's not because I think you're lower. It's not because it is your lowest. It's because you're at your rawest kind of thing, you know? Not to undermine what you're going through, but you're just willing to say something that's true. And in those times, I absolutely have written songs of hope for me. If like I want to feel hopeful, or I need to try and make something of feeling so low, because otherwise, like if I don't like transform that into something that would resemble at least a song, then like what is it? Not what is it for, but it's just the way that I seem to go from feeling not so good to feeling better. And I'm like, oh, okay, it's there. And I think in some way, and now obviously, like when you get to know that like songs are a part of people's lives, then it seems like even more useful to do that. It's useful enough just to write the song. There's lots of songs that no one's ever heard that I have from those times. But I'm actually first and foremost really just write those songs because I'm like, it's my way of dealing with it. Someone might go for a run. Someone might journal a lot. Someone might go and talk to their mate over a beer. We all got different ways of kind of dealing with it, but I've definitely written in hope on a lot of things. And I think that's like so wonderful. I think that's what people probably connect with in those times. Those low moments, you write songs about hope that things will get better. And I think we all want to know that things can be better than like the suffering we're feeling right now.
And that's probably why they work well, because you're making them for you. And by doing so, you're putting yourself in a position that other people can relate to. You're not making it for someone else. So when you're making it for you, you're sharing your story and you're opening up. And you said there, when you're in the low times, that's when you open up the most. And I think maybe it's because you're under the notion of, what do I have to lose? Whereas when you're doing something great, you don't want to open up. We don't want to revisit the low times when we're doing really well. But then when you're in those low times, you're actually going, fuck it. What do I have to lose? Let's open up. Let's leave nothing on the table. Let's just share what's on our mind. And I think through doing that, you realize that a lot of other people are wanting to share their pain, but they don't feel like they can. And then that's how they can relate. It's quite cool.
Yeah, man. I feel like something I want to bring back on this tour is also take a moment just to really tell people. I'm not sure about when this podcast comes out in relation to the tour dates, but I want to...
Comes out on Monday.
Monday? Oh, wow. So I think it's before tour. Wow. Okay, so when I'm on tour in 6 days after that.
Get tickets?
Casual tickets. No. I want to just tell people, I want to take a moment at each show to just to say, before I play one particular song off the new album called Addicted, I just want to tell people in a short, succinct way that all those experiences have shaped me. And not only have they shaped me, but the longer time goes on, the more obvious it is that also they've been like fundamental in like my value set and decisions. Like I should have nothing but gratitude for all of my hardest times, for my biggest burn. It was after my biggest burnout that I stopped touring, started the record label, and like that wasn't happening if everything, I wouldn't have stopped touring. I wouldn't have had surgeries on, I wouldn't have the surgeries on my eyes. I wouldn't have, so all these, it's how I discovered meditation. It's how I've discovered something that's like fundamentally awesome in my life now. And so I want to, I just want to acknowledge those low times, of which though, you know, I think many people, I've had an absolutely blessed life, you know, and I have my very human challenges. But for me, the most hopeful thing is that I could turn them into something wonderful. Or it seems over time clear to me that some of my biggest challenges have also brought me some really beautiful gifts. And I want to kind of share some of those things on stage a little more on this next tour, amongst the singing and dancing, and you should come out to a show, amongst something that's very like the love bubble. You know, the show is the love bubble, and take a moment somewhere in the middle of the show just to be like, hey, just letting you know, I suffer really bad on a lot of things, and I've had all these thoughts. And because also I feel like it's really, when I've had such a good life, how on earth can you can feel guilty when you have the life that we have here, particularly as many people in Australia. It's an unbelievable life. And when you're like having your little breakdown about rehearsals in the Northern Rivers after your second coffee, after a surf with dolphins, you know what I mean? Like you feel this, how can I justify any of that? But I think we're having a very human experience, all of us. And I would like to just let people know that I have those flat moments, because people come and see me at a show and they assume that's me. They assume the hour and a half is the way I always am, just like full of energy, smiling, laughing, playing songs. And maybe we both got to do that, you know, as much as possible, which I think you're doing in the questions you have and on the podcast, is just trying to go, there's actually this whole human experience and it's wonderful and it's up and it's down, but just maybe that's the antidote to the reels not reality, you know. Maybe the antidote is just sharing it a bit more.
I think what's powerful about you saying that all of the low times have turned into something so special and they've all been meant to be is recognizing that if that's your pattern, like your pattern is you go through a low and on the other side of it there's a high. And then you look back and you're connecting the dots and you go, okay, if I didn't have the low, I wouldn't have had all the highs. I wouldn't have been who I am today and which I'm proud of. So if your pattern is that the low was the catalyst for the change, surely you know that when you get into another low, there is going to be another change that's massive and impactful and meaningful and valuable on the other side.
And that's the trick, and we should have that written down. We should have it written down on our fridges.
Because then that makes us be able to go through the low time easier. Because we know through our patterns that we're going to have a high. And it's like that pendulum swing again, like we said earlier. And I think it's really cool to hear someone like you just openly say, yes, I'm smiling and singing and dancing on stage, and I hope you guys are too in the crowd, but it's not always the case. And realize that the human experience is one that's made up with highs and lows, and that the lows are what make the highs high, or else everything would just be normal. We can enjoy that fruits more.
Oh man, it's so like no one believes me. I get so scared all the time. I try and tell certain people around me, I'm like I get terrified. I have like, again, people wouldn't believe me because I've just gone and like I've gone and done things, and they assume there would be like this immense self-confidence. And I think I'm confident about some things, but I also battle like crippling self-doubt, like just utterly proper crippling. And it's, again, like, and people sometimes don't believe me when I say that. It's like, it's to accept that as part, and to accept that in yourself as part and parcel, to accept that like, man, there's too many examples of like how fundamental the hardest things have been, like without stumbling upon meditation, because one day I was like, I've tried everything. I still feel like crap. I'm going to go sit on the beach until I figure something out. And I just sat there and closed my eyes, and I was like, that was the first meditation moment. That's what formed more reflection, stillness, poetry. It's made my shows. I mean, I wouldn't have done poetry books if I hadn't discovered meditation, because that was the catalyst. And if I hadn't had a hard enough year of touring, I wouldn't have stopped touring. I wouldn't have had time to consider my options with my family regarding sign to a major label, stay independent, start your own label. Like stuff that's like, yeah, I cannot stress enough how those things, those really hardest times, I mean, in that time working on Laps Around the Sun, which would then be an album that would go and like change my life in a lot of ways, you know? So yeah, I can't. And the trick is, like you pointed out, it's just like remembering it, because in our human experience, I find I always forget. I have some suffering and I'm like, it's never going to end. And just trying to see that, man, if we could see that yin and yang of those two things, we'd be as peaceful as anyone on the planet, and that would be good.
Just taking a step back from the black wall that we sometimes are looking at, and just being able to see a bit more. I really, really appreciate you. And thank you for, I feel like I could just talk to you for 8 hours and go deeper and deeper and deeper. But I just want to commend you for everything that you're doing. And I just had a thought just before we wrap up the show. Do you have a poem on your notes or something that you can read to the audience? We can cut this in. Is there anything you can read? I love poetry, and I think there's something so powerful about it. But have you got any poems you can share?
I got one that I know off by heart because it's on the new album. I could tell you that one.
Let's roll it.
Okay. When you set out in the pursuit of your dreams, you adopt the responsibility of the dreamer. And your role in this is of utmost importance, because people are rarely encouraged to pursue a life worth living for. Yet it is the pursuit of our dreams and the previously unimagined that keeps hope and the spirit alight.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you, man. Thank you for having me. Thanks for having a place for musicians to be able to talk. That's not the 45 minutes or an hour and a half at a show, you know. That's not always the place to talk for an hour and a half. But thank you for having the place for us to do that.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate you. And I just think that we need more people like you sharing your stories and giving people insight in the way that you've lived and panned out your life. I think it's so cool, and it's just a reminder for everyone just to, if you don't know what to do or you don't really have it all figured out, just keep taking steps forward on what you want to do, like busking and living in a van and one thing leading to another. Like unconventional is the only route to true fulfillment, I think, and just paving your own way is going to be the thing that gives you this kick in life, and you've certainly done that. So I'll leave all of your details in the show notes in the description below. Is there anything you want to share to the audience? Is there anything you want to promote, anything coming up that you'd love to share?
Yes, it's very serious. After all of this, I still don't know what I'm doing. Just so you know, that's a mutual feeling. And I have a new album and a world tour in 2025. You can find the details on the internet.
Awesome. And I'll leave all of them in the description below so you can go and check that out. Thank you so much, Ziggy. I appreciate you, brother. And we'll have to do a round two again at some point.
Yes, sir. Look forward.
And if you've enjoyed this show and you've made it to the end and you're not sick of my voice or Ziggy's voice yet, if you can screenshot this and post it on your story and tag us just to let us know that you've made it to the end and you've enjoyed the show, and share it with your audience, because it helps the show grow and helps us keep getting amazing people just like Ziggy back on the show. And leave us a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple, because again, it will keep on helping the show grow and keep on growing together. But we're going to sign out for this week, but I'll see you next week.
Goodbye, everybody. Be well.
See you guys.